Yeah, we saw 194 million ounces in the shortfall, according to the Silver Institute, which is a multi-decade high, four times what we saw in 2021. And what's interesting about that is that it excludes recycling, or includes
Oh,
recycling
wow.
over 180 million ounces. So when you take the 180 million ounces out of the recycling numbers out of the total supply, and that's the one thing that people aren't understanding is that those numbers that the Silver Institute publishes has recycling as part of the supply side equation. And so when you take out the 180 million ounces, you're at about 662 million ounces versus 1.1 million in demand. So the mine supply is vastly lower than the demand, especially when you pull out recycling. And it's interesting that they don't make a distinction about that. When recycling is excluded, you're talking a 439 million ounce shortfall. You put it back into it, okay, fine. You got whatever. You got 194 million ounces. So it's a big deal when you factor in the recycling. But look, the bottom line is that there is far greater demand than there is supply, and they expect it to increase here in 2023.
Yep.
And look, we've talked about the geological term epithermal. Silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal, very near the surface. So the big deposits were found long ago, long before the advent of advanced imagery. And that's why only 35% of all silver that comes to market comes from primary silver miners. 65% of that silver that is mined, call it 850 million ounces that is actually pulled out of the ground. 65% of it, over 500 million ounces, is mined by companies who have no business or
Yeah.
interest in byproduct.
Yeah. By
So
accident.
So a very small portion of silver, when you exclude byproduct mining and recycling, roughly 250 million of the 1.1 billion comes directly from silver producers. It's a very slippery slope, I guess you could say, in terms of dwindling global supply, in terms of mine supply, versus an insatiable and ever increasing demand, both monetarily and industrially.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand that. Like looking forwards, they don't look at the macro. I think they focus more on the immediate and don't put into play what would the demand look like in 5 years, 10 years, if we already are having supply deficits. Where is that silver going to come from in 5, 10 years? Out of
What
thin
you're,
air?
what you're basically describing is the difference between the Chinese and the Americans in the way that we look at things. We focus on minutes and hours and days and weeks. They look on things in terms of years and centuries, years, decades, and centuries. They have been positioning for a very long time. And if you look at where all of the silver and gold, and not just those types of commodities, but everything, the aluminum, the zinc, they are stockpiling everything that they can. And you look at a country like India doing the same thing now, who
Yeah.
imported 300 million ounces this year. So the demand is extreme around the world. And you're right, where does it come from? It'll be very difficult to, I think, continue to, if things continue the way they are geologically. Remember, for 5,000 years, the mining ratio was equal to the price of 16 to 1 in its relationship to gold. Now that mining ratio is 7 to 1. And so what you see is a declining geological footprint. And as more and more demand in green and digital applications, on top of the revitalization we've seen in its monetary applications, where does it come from? You got that's anybody's guess at that point.
Yeah. Do you think that this is the breakout year for silver, 2023?
I think you could make a very strong argument that it is, on many levels. And, in particular, I think it's important to note that we look at the dollar being ridiculously strong in 2022. and as strong as it's been in a very long time. And when you look at silver, which finished the year in dollar terms up about 3.5%, 4%, in the face of a massively strong dollar, to put that into context, the last time the dollar was this strong, silver was less than $5 an ounce. And so it just goes to show how strong silver demand is. When you look at, for example, it's a little bit easier to, I think, to figure this out in terms of gold. When you look at what gold has done this year, it was unchanged in dollar terms. Silver, as I mentioned, was up 83 cents or 3.6%. But when you look at gold, and I haven't figured it out with silver in other currencies. I suppose I ought to do that before I come on the Silver Slayer show. Shame on me. But in terms of gold, you look at gold in euros and UK pounds. In the UK, gold was up 11.8%, setting all new all-time highs in the euro, up 5.8%. In other words, the dollar strength has kind of blurred the strength of gold and silver. The rest of the world is seeing these at or near all-time highs, especially in gold and silver, much better performing in other currency terms than in the dollar. But when you look at silver compared to stocks, bonds, real estate, and cryptocurrencies, it outperformed than all of them, even in dollar terms, and with a dollar that was inordinately strong. And I'll tell you something, man, if you take a look at the dollar index on one chart laid over the silver futures price, you will see that when the dollar is strong, silver is inverted. It underperforms.
Oh yeah.
Dollar turns, silver outperforms. One other thing that I'd like to mention in terms of 23 outlook, that any time that we've seen silver touch 92 to 1 or thereabouts, there's been 4 times since the year 2000. Anytime that happens, bang, it goes straight down the other way. Sometimes it takes years, or sometimes it takes months, like it did in 2010 and 11. In 2010, I noticed it up at that level. I'm like, my gosh, it's never, ever, ever here. And within 7 months, it was 37 to 1. And I was telling everyone, sell your gold, buy silver at 85 to 90 to 1. And then it reverted to its mean. Its average ratio, gold to silver, which, for 150 years, that average ratio, price ratio, has been about 42 to 1. And now it's coming out of the ground at 7 to 1.
Right.
That ratio had a lot to do with logistics and storage and the Industrial Revolution and all of the things that have gone into gold being more of a monetary metal than silver. All of a sudden, silver has woken up and is standing side by side with gold for its monetary purposes. So all of these ratios, I think, will really even accentuate themselves more when things start to correct. And I can simply tell you that everything from its ratio, from its geologic footprint, from the strength of the dollar probably turning over, the fundamentals could not be better for silver. And sometimes in life, you just got to have strong fingertips, and you got to be able to hang on and trust your conviction and trust your gut. And remember that this is not about becoming wealthy. And you may, it has better, I think, fundamentals than just about any investment on the planet. And that includes something like Bitcoin, which you could argue has great fundamentals. For some people's mind, it does. Some people's it doesn't. But the point is that it's a speculative investment, that being something like Bitcoin. It's not a store of value like we've been told. Silver is a store of value, but it also has, I believe, speculative investment potential. But I don't view it that way. I view it as the most undervalued asset on the planet that will have its day. Absolutely. And why not 2023? Fundamentals are pointing towards that for sure.